All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. I am your host, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert, and I'm coming to you live once again from Northern Virginia. And I think we have a unique show tonight. It's a little different than our regular shows. As you know, we try to connect veterans across the United States and their families and let them share their experiences and their military life and what they're doing once they leave the service. Tonight's show will be a little different. We'll get into that in just a moment. But first, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor tonight, Nationwide IT of Fairfax, Virginia. Nationwide IT is a veteran-owned information technology and management consulting company designated an 8A small business by the Small Business Administration, and it also a certified disabled veteran-owned small business. CK Park and his staff will deliver first-class services and support to their clients in the federal government and the private sector. So we'll have their contact information up on the screen, but I wanted to thank CK and his company for sponsoring our show tonight. All right, so let's get started. Let's meet tonight's guest, and I want to kind of remind everyone, tonight, as I said, is a little different, and we have a return guest tonight. And if you look on the screen, some of you might remember from our debut show, LaShonne Williams Parker. And LaShonne was on to share her experiences, and we'll kind of get into that again in a moment, just to remind everyone. And we have a special guest as well, Carolyn Terry, who is joining us. She and LaShonne are kind of kindred spirits, and they've shared some very similar experiences. And so I thought it would be good to bring LaShonne and Carolyn on the show. And let's talk a little bit more about those experiences and how these two ladies have dealt with them. So for those of you that may have forgotten, LaShonne was a 6-year Army veteran, wasn't it? Yeah, 6 years?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So LaShonne was a 6-year Army veteran, and she transitioned out of the service and went to work in the private sector, and then went to work for the government. And Carolyn, of course, Carolyn is living and working around the DC metro area. And I think it's interesting when I started looking at what these two ladies went through. And I'm going to have each one of them take a few minutes here at the beginning of the show to share those experiences. And LaShonne, I'd like to start with you first, if you would, again, and take us through just a few minutes of why you were on the first show and what happened, and how that experience went for you.
Okay. The first thing I would like to do, Paul, is to say that I'm in the basement of my house. My house is being painted, so I'm in the basement. My internet is not that great. I didn't realize it until now, so hopefully I won't freeze up. I was on the show previously to talk about the devastation and loss that I had of my 16-year-old son who was murdered. I started out by just sharing with everybody that I was the happiest woman on earth with my 2 children, my career, just everything seemed to be going really great in my life. Until one night, I got a call for a lady screaming on the phone saying that my son had gotten shot. Now, I was in shock because in my surroundings, I just wasn't accustomed to people getting killed. I would hear it on the news, but like everything else, you always think that it's somebody else, and you don't really, really understand until it happens to you. So that happened. I just lost everything. I had to figure out where to call the hospitals. I eventually got to a hospital on the phone, and they told me that they had a gunshot victim in there, but they could not tell me his name or anything. They couldn't reveal that information. Then I called the nearby police stations, and a person talked with me. Evidently, he knew who I was when I called, and he told me to just sit tight. But my son had gone to what they call in this area a teenage go-go, a club in the DMV area. They have these go-go's, the local bands come and they play, and the teenagers go. And he took my car, and when he left, after the dance, he went there to celebrate somebody's birthday. After the dance, he's driving home, and all of a sudden, someone pulls up beside the car and starts shooting. So when I got to the hospital, I still didn't know that it was my son. And a police officer came to me, talked to me gently, and asked me if I could share with him what my son looked like. And I really couldn't think of anything other than he was a Black young boy, until I remembered I had allowed him to get a tattoo on the inner part of his arm. And when I shared that with my baby, my son, at that time I had a son and a daughter, and we were just extremely close. I mean, you couldn't get any closer, I don't think, than the three of us. And so I was in love with my children, and I did a lot of things in life because of them. And so this really just devastated me. It took everything I had out of me, all my motivation and drive and goals and all those things and passions that I once had. They actually stopped at that point. And it was hard. I had to reach out to somebody to get through. I had a hard time going back to work, and I did not go back to work immediately. Like not even a month later, I was still home. I had shared that if I could have just gotten under my bed and stayed there and just everybody just left me alone, I would have been okay. That's how I felt at that time. It was just really hard. I never experienced it. It had never hit home for me that something like that would ever happen.
Yeah, and I remember from the debut show that you did, and we can still see that it's still a very emotional experience for you, even all these years later, as I'm sure any mother would go through after losing a child. So I appreciate you again coming back on to share that with us. But, as we go through the show, I want us to get into the part where you took that and turned that around, you and Carolyn both. So we're going to get to that shortly. But first, I want to go to Carolyn. And Carolyn, I know that you dealt with a number of issues. You had a child murdered as well. You had family members die of cancer. And your husband, retired Army Master Sergeant who served in Vietnam, James Terry, he suffered badly from PTSD, and I know that was a struggle, you trying to help James, recover and get through that. And it's never really a fully recover, because I deal with that myself, and I can identify with some of the struggles you have, and I know it's not easy on the family member. So, Carolyn, if you would share a little bit of your story with us too.
Sure. It was one of those situations where a mother always say she never want to get that phone call. But for me, I didn't get the phone call. I made the phone call. I had a doctor's appointment that day, and my husband hadn't arrived to pick me up. And I called him to find out why was he late. At the moment, I couldn't hear it in his voice. All I know, he just said, "I'll call you back." And I'm like, "Call me back. I have a few minutes before I need to get up the street." And he just said, "I'll call you back. I'll call you back." So I hung up the phone and I waited a few minutes. Then he wasn't calling me back quick enough. And I called him back. And what he said to me, and my son was a child that once upon a time was in the streets. I'm not going to sit up here and paint a perfect picture of my son because he had his demons, but he was changing his life. He decided he no longer wanted that life in the street. So he decided to make some changes. So he was always getting in trouble, always getting locked up. And when I did call my husband, and he said, "Man is gone," and I'm like, "Gone? What do you mean?" I said, "Oh, he's in trouble again?" I said, "What did he get locked up for this time?" And he paused. And then it was the switch in his tone that made me feel something different. And he said, "No, he's dead." And I took the phone immediately away from my end. I just looked at it and I said, "What did you say? Repeat yourself." And I'm like, he said, "No, he's dead." And I remember just flying back into my office, and just grabbing all my things and jumping on the elevator and getting off on my floor and running into the bathroom. And I got up under the sink and I said, "God, you can't do this to me again." I had just buried my daughter within 3 years of that, of ovarian cancer. So to get information now that your only last child is gone, that was very devastating, because that was an unexpected death. I deal better with expected death, people that are sick and you have time, than I do with unexpected death, where there is no time. So that death for me, it knocked the wind out of me. You know, I began to play detective. I began to be out on the streets acting like I had information, you know, with his friends, just to get somebody to tell me something. You know, I was at his grave site like every day, just looking for answers, just, you know, having visuals in the spot that he got killed, you know, and then I had to realize that I had to let him rest. You know, he needed peace. And as long as I was out there digging and looking for answers that I may never get, you know, he would never rest. So I had to get to a point in my life that one day, you know, and it's been 13 years. Sean and I, we share a common factors in both of the boys' lives. Both our sons were named Man. We called them Man, and they both were killed months apart. You know, and her auntie is my best friend. So that's how her and I fell in each other's lap, her aunt.
Well, I thought at first when you were talking about your son and you said man, I caught that because LaShonne, I knew that was that was your son as well, and I said, "Wow, what a coincidence here!" So, yeah, so I imagine that even brought you two a little bit closer as you were dealing with all that. So, Carolyn, if you would, if you don't mind, as you know, this is definitely a veteran-oriented show, and LaShonne was an Army veteran, and you were married to a retired veteran as well, your husband James. Would you share a little bit of the story of James and what you went through and trying to help him?
Sure. Just learning that, you know, my husband was suffering with PTSD, not knowing what PTSD really stood for. When I did find out it was any trauma, you know, and being in the military, after talking with him and sharing his experience with me, you know, being in the military, especially the Vietnam War, and seeing people get killed, you know, and even him have to probably kill somebody, to live with that was definitely an experience for me. Like, there were moments where you would think he was literally still in the Vietnam War. There were sounds that he couldn't hear, like the 4th of July fireworks going off. You know, that took him back, like woods. Anytime we would drive somewhere going out town, he saw a lot of trees or whatnot. It reminded him of the war. If we went to a restaurant, he never sat with his back toward the door. He had always had to see who was coming in the restaurant. So it was like he was always on guard. You know, his defense mechanism was always up. You know, so I didn't know how to deal with that until I learned for myself that I also suffered with PTSD, but in a different type of way. You know, so I learned that all PTSD is just not under military. It's any type of trauma that you suffer from. So for me, it was my childhood trauma, you know, my abuses, and the trauma of the death of my children, family members, and dealing with the, you know, my husband, and then the death of my husband, you know. So, and that's why he was on retirement disability early, because it had a heart condition. Then one thing led to another, to another, to another. So back in 2016, he had a stroke, a massive stroke. And after that, I took him for 3 years before he passed away in 2019. But in watching him suffer the different illnesses that he went through, even with that, from, you know, the stroke and his heart and the blood, the bleeding, it was. I don't even have a word for it, you know, but it taught me something. You know, it gave me strength to endure, you know, to being married to a military man. It taught me a lot. I felt like I was on the battlefield with him. You know, I had to fight every war that he fought. You know, just being his wife, his friend, his confidant, his shoulder, his listening ear, whatever it is that he needed. I had to be in that war with him in order for him to win.
You know, that's a very, I mean, that is a very profound thought, because I can tell you that in dealing with the same kind of situation myself. I worry about what my wife may have to go through later as I even get older. Just like you spent all those years taking care of James. I've often mentioned to my wife, I'm worried about her having to take care of me. Should I get to the point where, I get worse? Because, let's face it, I'm 61, I'm getting up there. And she reminds me of that every day because her nickname for me is, "Hey, old man." Um, but it's said in a loving way, I have to say. But I can understand, because the very same thing that you went through taking care of James, I actually do worry a little bit about it myself for my wife. So, um, I can see where that would leave you with those types of scars. And I just hope and pray that I don't leave my wife with anything like that if I get to the point where she has to take care of me.
But let
But
me say, let
yeah,
me
go
say
ahead.
this, Paul. My husband was worried. He was worried that back at age 55 he was going to die. Because we were so different in ages. We're 13 years different. So when my
Yeah.
husband passed away, he was 71, and I'm 59 now. But he did worry about that even up until the day that he got sick. And it's the aftermath for real. For military wives, when your loved one passed away, all the things that we have to deal with, making sure we know have all the information when it comes to you guys being in the military, DD-14, and insurance policies, and it's just was so much work. I thought it was never ending for me. It's probably still some stuff that I need to look into, but it was a lot of work to be left behind and not knowing what I was doing. And my husband used to always say, "I need you to read this book." I think it's a vet book. You probably know what I'm talking about. "I need you to read this book." And I would never read the book because I felt like I didn't need to read the book. He wasn't going anywhere. Tell your wife, read the book. Read the
Yeah.
book. So if that day ever come, whether it's you or her, she would be prepared, because Paul, I wasn't prepared. I really wasn't. I didn't know the work in this, how this was going to be after the passing of my husband, especially being in the military.
Yeah. Well, let me kind of shift this just very briefly. And LaShonne, I'm gonna come back to you for a second. I'm gonna let you tell the audience how you and Carolyn met.
Mhm. Okay. Well, she already mentioned that she knows my aunt. They're best friends, but I didn't know that she knew my aunt. And after my son passed, of course, I was really depressed. So my aunt called me to check on me, doing, and she mentioned that she was at one of her girlfriend's house, and her son was recently murdered. And I didn't think anything of it. But then I went to in the support group that I was a part of, we used to have programs calling Breaking the Silence, and police officers would come and we would do things like explain to them how we as family members needed them to communicate that message to us about our loved ones being murdered.
Mhm.
And so I saw the lady on who was Carolyn on the panel at the state was putting this on, and she started sharing her story, and all of a sudden I thought to myself, wonder if she's my aunt's friend who my aunt was just talking about. And she was.
Hmm.
Coincidence.
And we've been
Yeah,
connected ever since.
and I know it's good to have someone to share your experiences with, especially when you have like experiences. And I know you two ladies been through so much. LaShonne, you even as a veteran yourself, and then Carolyn, you married to a career veteran and caring for him, in his struggles. So what I'd like to do when we come back from our break is continue the story and then have you ladies share with us how you got into this crusade you got into to trying to help others. So for those of you listening out there, we're going to continue our conversation as soon as we come back from our commercial break. So we'll be right back. All right. Welcome back to the WGSN Going Solo Veterans Corner. We're talking with our guests tonight, LaShonne Williams Parker and Carolyn Terry. Well, let's get back to the discussion with our guests. Ladies, I know that we've got a fan down there. It looks like somebody really, really loves you two guys. That's great. Um, so I know that you two struggled to get through this, and it seemed like you were dealing with a lot of this yourself. You ended up getting together, and I know in talking with you, and of course I've had an opportunity to talk a little more with LaShonne than I have with you, Carolyn, but I know that you two decided that you wanted to try and turn this into something positive. So if you would, Carolyn, would you share with us a moment on how you and LaShonne got into this? What drove you to do the things that you decided to do, to turn this around, to try and reach out to others and help other people that have suffered like you did?
The loss of our children, having the
Yeah.
same thing in common. Always look on the news, there was always some child or someone getting killed. And LaShonne and I just started getting together and going to funerals. We actually went to a funeral of a baby that was killed. And we didn't know the family, but we just wanted to be there for support. And we actually got up and spoke. Well, actually, she was supposed to be speaking, but she put me out there. But we both got to speak, and just to see the impact that it made on the people in the church, and even after the funeral, that right there was the key to that. We have to continue to reach out to people, to keep speaking, or being used at these platforms whenever being asked, so someone will know, how do we make it through? And for me, my relationship, God, is what helped me get through it. I know for a fact that if I didn't have God in my life, I couldn't have done it. Especially after losing the first child, and then to lose another child, then your brother, your mother, and then your husband, so I had to keep the most important thing in front of me, which was my relationship with God, in order for me to get through it, and in order for me to help other people, in order for me to be able to share. I would never tell anybody it's going to go away overnight or in a month or in a year, because it's not. But day by day, one day at a time, it gets easier. It gets better. And it has for me. It has gotten easier, and it has gotten better. So basically, just the loss of our children is what keep us doing what we do.
Yeah. So LaShonne, I know you guys went to that funeral, and I'll just share some very briefly with you. Those funerals can be so intense, and during my military time, I performed funeral detail a number of times in the VA cemetery while I was on active duty, and I still remember to this day when I was flag bearer after the flag was folded, and I was presenting the flag to the widow of a World War II veteran who had died, and when I bent down to give her the flag, and there's um, this little rehearsed statement that we give to the family because they want everyone to have that universal message. And as I bent down to give it to the widow, I was so shocked when she grabbed a hold of the sleeve of my uniform coat and just broke down in tears. And her son was sitting next to her, and he took the flag from me, and he finally got her hand off my sleeve, and he was apologizing to me, and I just told him right there as I was bent over, I said, don't ever apologize for that. So it was admirable that you guys did what you did at that funeral, because I've seen the grief at those funerals, and even veterans funerals. LaShonne, so when you went to that funeral and you guys started to speak out, Is that when you made the transition to look for these other groups, or look for groups with parents who had suffered a similar loss? Or is that how you two really got into this?
I think mine was before then. And even during that time, Paul, we were still, even though we had the desire to go and support and help people, it was hard. It was a struggle for Carolyn to even come to me and say, hey, this little baby was murdered. Let's go to the funeral. I was like, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can go. And on the way there, while we're sitting in the funeral, I'm telling her, when the people get up to speak, I want to get up and I want you to go with me. And it was just the oddest thing. And then we get up, we line up, and I don't know what happened, but then I pushed her in front of me and said, I can't do it. So it was just really weird, but it turned out to be a great message from both of us. I don't even remember what I said, but the place was packed. By the time we finished what we had to say, everyone was standing up. So we understand the impact. So it was really like, I guess after my son was murdered, I felt like I was a part of this new group of people that I didn't want to be part of. And I feel like I felt like I was obligated to. There is no way something that devastating can happen to me and I not go out and support and help other people. So hard to revisit all of this, because right now I'm feeling so feel like I'm crying on the inside, because it's always there. We just manage through it better, but there's not a day really that somebody's always connecting me with someone else to support them and help them.
Yeah, so Carolyn, as you guys continue to go through this, what were some of the other groups that you met with, or that you tried to support, or that you sought out? What were some of the other groups that you and LaShonne worked with?
Well, actually, it was just an individual thing, someone giving me a phone call. We had the group that we came in together. Well, Sean was in it, and I became a part of it. But it was just running into people, bumping into people. No particular organization. I never seeked out an organization. I know they have the crime victims organization out there, but they didn't do good by me. So they were not one of my favorites. They had their opinions, but I had facts. So I just pretty much just was bumping into people. And anybody that knew my story, they would refer them to me to call me, or for me to call them. But I always stayed connected with Sean and the group.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
LaShonne, is that, yeah, go ahead, LaShonne.
I was just going to say, it's not something that you actually raise your hand and say, hey, I'm over here. My son was murdered. We'll help you out. We'll support you. It's just one of those things. Once people know, just gravitate. You're a part of this group. We were a part of this Center for Truth, Justice, and Healing group with, I mentioned on the previous show, the person who ran the show, who ran the support group, he himself, his son was murdered. He was a reverend. His son was murdered. Although his case was resolved, the police found out who it was that killed his son. Our group had our cases had not been solved, and still to this day. On the last show that I was here, I invited my detective that's on the case for my son to chime in on the show and watch it. And it's so unfortunate because just before the show, his teenage son was murdered. So it's like, it's crazy. It's all over the place. It's sad. So we all need each other.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Carolyn, how are you doing now? How are you? I know it never goes away. Same thing with taking care of James like you did, and seeing all of that, with the loss of your child, and then taking care of James. How are you doing now, Carolyn?
Well, now, actually, it took the death of my husband to trigger all the other deaths. I think I just kind of blocked them. But when my husband passed away, then all the previous deaths start hitting me. But I'm okay. I'm okay because, I had the opportunity to do what I was supposed to do by my loved ones. My daughter, I was able to take care of her for about a year. I took care of my mom. I came in at the end and helped out with my brother. And I definitely took care of my husband. It was just my son's, that unexpected death, that really took me for a loop. And I think my husband's death kind of took me for a loop because we had been together. He died on, why did that leave me so quickly? He died in June, the 25th. He died the 25th, and our anniversary was the 30th. So that was kind of hard. 5 days later, our anniversary would have been our 19th anniversary. So when you have a mate, a loved one who is basically your best friend, your all in all, and you have those type of years, the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifference, but you stand on your vows, to death do us part, in sickness and health, good and bad. It was hard in the beginning. And I think what really made it hard for me was the fact that in the military, you don't get to bury your loved one right away. So the fact that I had the funeral in June and wasn't able to bury him until August played a big part on my emotions, because in my mind, he's still above the ground. And the hospital will call me and tell me to come pick him up because I had not had the closure. But it wasn't until I was able to literally put him in the ground and, have the burial that the closure set in, and I'm okay. I still have my days on and off, this home, we built this home together, so there's a lot of memories in here. So I have my good days and I have my bad days, but I have my happy days and I have my memories, and on that, my husband was like my hero. He pushed me to do things that I would never have done. He made me go to school and get not 1 degree, but 2 degrees. I would have never went to school. I don't like school like that, but he made me go get my associate's and my bachelor's degree. He always said he saw potential in me. So he was my hero. He wasn't just a hero for the United States Army. He was my hero.
He was your personal hero, right?
Yes, he was.
So do you mind me asking, was he buried in Arlington?
He is in Arlington.
Okay. That's when you said that you had to wait a little while to bury him. That was kind of the clue for me that he was probably buried in Arlington.
Yeah.
Okay. LaShonne, what about you, LaShonne? I mean, you and I used to talk quite frequently in years past. We kind of drifted to where we were both so busy, and then we reconnected, and I can still hear it in your voice. The emotions you have when you talk about man. Um, how are you doing now? I know you're remarried. I know your daughter seems to be doing well. But how are you yourself doing still?
Actually, I believe that I'm doing very well, considering how I was years after my son's death. It has been 13 years, but I just realized I mentioned that my house is being painted. And so as I'm trying to pack things up and move things to the center of the room, I come across my son's things in his closet. I had lots of things still there, shoes, clothes, I mean, all sorts of things. And so the other night I went through each piece and started reminiscing. And I started throwing some things away, giving some things to the thrift store. And I felt proud of myself that I was able to get to that point to actually get rid of those things and move to this, this new chapter. Of course, I kept some things, but yeah, I'm doing well. I'm doing well, but it was a process to get to this point.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, just listening to both of your stories, just how difficult it was. So as we get ready to close out the show, LaShonne, I'll ask you first. If there was one message you would like to share with the audience out there about your experience, whether it's another parent who's lost a loved one or another parent who's lost a child, if there was a message that you would like to share to them, what would that message be?
That message would be find some support group, confide in, someone who will allow you to grieve, someone who will tell you it's okay to cry, it's okay to share and express your feelings, it's okay to be honest, genuine with yourself and other people. I would tell them not to allow other people to rush them through their grief. Everyone grieves differently, and everyone has a right to grieve how they choose to grieve. And happiness, as I mentioned on the previous show, happiness comes with circumstances. And of course, we all know circumstances change at a drop of a dime. And so that unspeakable joy, find those practical things that can help you, that you can see that you can achieve. Connect with people who are positive and don't give up hope. And if you have God in your life, or if you are a Christian or know the Lord, pray. Pray for your strength and don't give up.
All right, Carolyn, what about you? Sharing these experiences with LaShonne and dealing with all the things you've dealt with, what would you say to our audience?
What I would say to the audience, and not just so much around just the deaths that I've experienced, but also in today's society and what's going on around us now with the pandemic. We have to learn how to love one another. We have to learn how not to take each other for granted. The one thing that I will share about my husband is the little things. He had two little things he wanted me to do that now I regret, and I felt like I took it for granted, was just to go to the grocery store. And I don't like going to the grocery store with a lot of people, so I wouldn't go. Or come out here and watch the football game. And for me, I'm not a sports person, so I want to be in the bedroom watching Lifetime. So now that he's gone, and when I think about those things, I was like, those were little things he asked. So we have to not take each other for granted. God knows this pandemic has taught us a lot, and I hope we are taking it on. It has given us time to, restore relationships, or build relationships, or whatever it is that we need to do, even within ourselves. So I would tell anybody and everybody, learn how to live, learn how to laugh, but most of all, learn how to love each other no matter what, because we didn't come with directions, nor instructions.
Yeah.
We just came the way God sent us.
I like that. That's very good. I like that. It looks like LaShonne liked it too. That was
Thank
very
you.
good.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
liable to bring some tears to some eyes with that
Oh
one,
my
Carolyn.
God.
I
Thanks.
got to tell you. Well, ladies, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show and sharing your story. And LaShonne, you for coming back and continuing the discussion and bringing Carolyn. Um, you two ladies have a lot to share, and I think you're really an inspiration to those folks out there who are watching the show. So again, thank you so much for coming on to share your experience, and we wish you both the best. And I'm sure, hopefully, I'll get to talk with you. I know, LaShonne, I'll be talking with you and Carolyn. You're always welcome to reach out to me.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll be able to talk again too as time goes on. But thank you both so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Definitely. I appreciate it. It was a
You're
great
welcome.
experience. Anytime. I'm available. I don't mind talking.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you for listening to our show tonight. And as we leave, I want to share a bit of information with you from the Department of Veterans Affairs for all of our veterans out there. VA has developed a program under the Supportive Services Veteran Families Program, which is now ready to award about $400 million in grants to help end homeless veterans. So for those of you that may know someone who might be in need of this help, you'll find the website on the bottom of the screen. Please take a few moments, and the website will be on my website on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network as well. Please visit there, click on the site, and get the information, because there are a lot of homeless veterans out there that could use the help, and this information just be able to help them. Well, thank you for listening to the show tonight, the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we are striving to bring veteran stories to you. And veterans, thank you for your service. And we hope that you are living your best life following your service to your country.
Yes.
We hope to see you on our next show. And thank you. Good night to everyone.
Good night.